Wood TV 8.
A very important conversation about your future is happening right now in the Wood TV studios. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Shaw.
And I'm Brian Sterling. Tonight we host a live town hall meeting with Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. This evening's pretty much about you, your life, your questions, your concerns. And we invite you to get involved online at woodtv.com.
Jobs, taxes, education, the topics are tough, but you deserve the answers, and that's what the next hour is all about.
This is a special presentation from 24-Hour News 8, the state of Michigan. Your money, your voice.
It's all about your money. Michigan's unemployment rate is well above the national average. Right now, President Obama is asking Congress to spend billions to create jobs.
But fewer jobs and fewer people now mean a smaller voice, less representation in Washington for those of us who call Michigan home.
So far this year, Governor Snyder, backed by big majorities in the State House and Senate, has made major changes in the way our state does business. A balanced budget, new business tax structure, tax on pensions, and education cuts all have drawn big protests at our state capitol.
So where do we go from here? Governor Snyder says tough decisions have to be made. Tonight, your voice will be heard. Moderating this evening, 24-Hour News 8 political reporter Rick Alvin.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a very important conversation. We will thank and welcome the governor in just a moment, but first I want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this tonight. This is part of our continuing commitment to bring you the important aftermath of elections. Everybody likes to cover the horse race. Everybody likes to see who's going to win. We all like to talk about polls, but elections are a lot more important than just who wins. What happens after an election? This has been an extraordinarily busy 8 months in Lansing. Many things have changed. Some things you may think are very good ideas, others you may not. And in this audience tonight, there is a broad difference of opinion about the direction that Michigan may be going. The governor has been kind enough to join us with this audience that we have selected that really covers the spectrum of West Michigan. By the way, if you want to know more about the audience members, you can go to woodtv.com, find out how we select these audiences. We've been doing it for a long time. I got to tell you, in talking to this group earlier, you're not going to be disappointed. They're coming with some great questions. And it's not just about the governor. If you think about Lansing in total, there are 150 folks that have to come to a consensus. The governor and lieutenant governor are very important, but what about those 148 members in the House and Senate? We wanted to make sure that they were represented here tonight, too. So before we begin, let's introduce Representative Kate Siegel, who is from Battle Creek, representing Democrats from the House. Representative Lisa Postumus-Lyons, a Republican from Alto, representing Republicans in the House. Senator Rebecca Warren, who I should point out is the governor's senator, actually represents the senator's home district from the Ann Arbor area, representing Democrats in the Senate, and Representative Dave Hildenbrand from Lowell, representing Republicans in the Senate. Thank you all for being here, because obviously this is the governor's town hall tonight, but when it is all said and done, a whole lot of people have to come together to make whatever is going to happen, happen. It is a pleasure for me to introduce Governor Rick Snyder. We have done these before. We did a number of them with Governor Granholm. We find these to be very valuable because it takes me out of the equation. You get to ask the questions. The governor gets to talk directly to you. So, Governor, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being, and we wanted you to make a few opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Rick, and I appreciate Wood TV putting this on because it's a great opportunity. One of the things I really enjoyed during the campaign trail, and I've enjoyed since being governor, are events like this. Because as governor, I view it, there are two key things you really want to do. One is communicate well, and it's an opportunity to communicate the message as to what the plan has been, what we've achieved, and where we're going. But secondly, by your questions, it's an opportunity to listen and to hear what's on your thoughts and minds. Because if you look at what government needs to become, what I'm focused on getting Michigan to become in terms of our government and our public sector, it's really a customer service business. And you, the citizen, are the customer. And the issue is how do we serve you best? Because it's really your success that makes us all successful. And one thing I'd ask you to do in terms of approaching tonight is think back a year. Think back to September of last year. And stop for a moment and say, how did I think Michigan was doing a year ago? And the interesting part is, I doubt there were many of us that said Michigan was on a positive path. Many of us were wondering, is Michigan broken? Or what are we going to do? And that's where I was excited and honored to be elected your governor, hired to be your governor, to say, here's a vision about reinventing Michigan. Here's a plan. And here's an attitude of action about making a difference. Because I'll tell you, and I still believe it, fixing Michigan was not good enough. We're 50 out of 50 in way too many things. To aspire to be 47, 46, 40-something is not who we are. It's about having that fire and passion to believe we can be top 10, we can be number 1. And the real power, the way to do it, is nothing to do with me or you. It's about we, about us all working together as Michiganders to really reinvent our state. And that's why I'm excited to have that dialogue tonight. So let's get going, Rick.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's step up here just a little bit so you're a little closer to some of the folks. Now, as we have talked with everybody just a few minutes before we came up, you can talk about whatever you want to do. I'm going to suggest some general topics based on what we heard from you at home. And let me remind you that you are part of this conversation too. At Facebook, woodtv.com, our Twitter account. We'll be going to the social media center. Susan Shaw is standing by there. Brian Sterling is going to stand by with our guest here in the studio. So as you stand up, folks at home will get to know a little bit more about you. Governor, if you will allow me, I would like to kind of frame this first very broadly. Sure. We can talk about what's happened, where it's going to go. But I would guess that many of you in this room are concerned about what was identified during the campaign as the #1 issue, which would have been jobs. Jobs. Anybody with a question about jobs?
Rick, I think we're going to start over here with Grant Wright. Grant is a Lowell man. He's unemployed. Your poster child pretty much for the last 3 years. You've been out of work. And you have a question tonight for the governor about your status.
What I want to know is about the long-term unemployed and also the older workers. What are we going to do to give employers incentive to get us back to work?
No, I appreciate your question, Grant. A couple things. You asked two parts about the long-term unemployed and then people that are older or in a stage in their career wondering what's going to come next. And there are a couple pieces to that. First, for the structurally employed. For the long-term unemployed, there's still much work to be done. And I don't walk away from that issue at all. It's something that we really need to focus in on because the question is, how do we help people get that first job, that entry-level job, to get them in the workforce and then give them an opportunity to get additional training? And one illustration I'll give you is I think we need to look at Michigan companies and their supply bases and to say there's employment opportunities there. And a tangible illustration I'll give you is if you think about our hospitals. We've got a lot of great hospitals and medical centers and things like that. That a number of them actually generate a lot of laundry business. And when you actually ask some of them where their laundry business goes, some of that business actually goes to Western New York. Might surprise you. So one of the questions you can get is, why isn't there an opportunity for, again, private sector people to come create laundry businesses that basically give an opportunity to give that entry-level job to people? And why can't we do those right here in our cities where we have a workforce and get that first job? And then the role of government to supplement that is to say, now that they're working, how can we work with them on increasing their skills and their opportunity to get that better paying job and continue moving up? Now, with respect to your question about workers that have been out there for a long time and now are looking for a new opportunity, what may be there, a lot of that is, first, we need to create more demand. We need to get our economy going. But then it's the training opportunities again and the matchup of skills and opportunity. And I'm proud to say I helped create a program called Shifting Gears a few years ago in the Ann Arbor area. And what Shifting Gears was all about was taking people that had a successful career in one field where there really weren't a lot of opportunities anymore, but to say, you've got all the skills to do a certain set of work, but how can we work with you to get you in a young company, a startup company, something new and different where you can take those vast experiences and potentially match up with some other people that don't understand the business areas that you're so good at and how to marry those together. And Shifting Gears has been very successful. And it's something that started in that area, but we're going to be trying to roll out that concept throughout all of Michigan to give an opportunity for people that have been there, done that kind of people. But they need to be put in a new cultural environment and given new opportunities to be creative, to be entrepreneurial, regardless of how old you are.
Brian, let's stick with jobs. Do you have anybody else over there who's got a question?
Well, talking, Rick, about matching up that skill set with the available workforce, Sherry Welsh. Sherry, if I could have you stand up for us. She's out of Kalamazoo. She is the owner of the executive search firm Welsh & Associates, and you notice some huge gaps between that skill set out there and the jobs you're trying to fill.
That's true. What I see in the clients I work with, and my client base is primarily West Michigan companies, so kind of know what we're talking about here. There's a real disconnect between the skills and education and experience that my clients are looking for and what's available in our talent pool here in the state of Michigan, and a real disconnect between generally the skills that are available in the ranks of the unemployed and what my clients are looking for. So my concern is, how do we get those unemployed folks the skills that they need to get them back to work? Right now, we're spending a lot of money on sort of a handout, and I'm wondering, how do we shift that and make it more of a hand up so they can take these jobs, these new post-recession, new economy jobs that require different skills?
Sure, your question's great, and you're right on with one of the big issues. So I agree with you, and actually, in fact, we've been working on that. And when you look at the schedule of things we're going to be talking about this fall, and I announced this back in the State of the State back in January, that in November we're going to do a special message on talent that's geared exactly to what you're talking to, that very point. Because if you look at it, and I use the word talent rather than workforce development, because workforce development's the old concept about we're going to train you to do something. Well, training someone to do something can either make a whole lot of sense or it makes no sense, because there either is a job in that field or not in that field. And too often we're training people in career opportunities where there really aren't a lot of job opportunities, and that's not a good thing. So the talent message is actually to address that particular question by going out to say, let's start doing an analysis of demand, where the demand for jobs of the future are. And I've already started the discussion with economists to help, but also our large employers, to say, talk about your workforce of the future. The automotive companies, for example, they'll tell you they're concerned about where are the people to work in the plants, that people don't understand what skills are required. So we're going to get that information, and we're going to do some supply and demand matching on how to make that connection. And it's going to apply to engineering jobs, but also a lot of skilled trade kind of jobs that are the ones open. Because I can tell you one illustration to really make the point about what's available. So I can tell you there's one job out there I know that if you have the skill set, you can get a job anywhere in Michigan in about 20 minutes, and that's welder. It might surprise you. But I was up in the UP this summer, I've been in the city of Detroit, I've been in West Michigan, and if you're a welder, you have a job. Now the question is, how many people, and particularly kids and their parents, understand what a welding career is actually all about? Or knowing how much a welder can make and how honorable a profession it is? And then who knows where those welding programs are? And to give you an illustration of how exciting the demand is for some of those spots, is I was talking to a college president on one of my tours around the state, and they said, we're concerned that you like all these metrics, and one of the things you may measure us on is how many people complete their degree. And he said, the reason I'm worried about that is we have a welding program. And he goes, my concern is we don't have anyone finish their degree for the welding program, because after they take their welding credit hours, they leave because they have a job. How many people know that? And we can do a great job. And in fact, in the November message, my goal is to make Michigan the innovator, to show we're being more thoughtful about matching talent than any other place in the United States, and to really reinforce that message that Michigan is now a leader in our country, not a follower.
One of the places where this conversation continues, Governor, is with the social media. We have a Cover It Live page that's going on right now. There are people that are talking about what you're talking about in this room, even as they watch. There are people that are on Facebook and on Twitter and at woodtv.com. And Susan Shaw is standing by. We've been taking your questions now for a number of days with our first question from our social media center. Susan?
Rick, it's been about 2 weeks now that we've been asking people to submit their questions for Governor Snyder. And again, we've been monitoring Twitter, Facebook. Also, you can take part in the conversation right now at woodtv.com on our Cover It Live forum. And our first question comes from Jason, and he's from Jackson. He writes this: what, if anything, do you like about President Obama's latest jobs bill that he presented to Congress today? What items do you believe would help this state the most? And what items do you believe would push us back?
And this is a relatively new bill that's been rolled out, and part of that question also contains what kind of cooperation can or should the state expect from the federal government, I would think.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, when the president gave a speech last week on jobs, I in fact issued a statement that talked about there were some good elements in that speech, and in fact there were good elements because Michigan had already done some of those activities. So it was really an opportunity to say Michigan is being a leader now, and it's great to see at the federal level them looking at some of the same things that we had already done and how to embrace those ideas. So some of those things included talking about some of the job creation ideas, about creating jobs. It actually talked about closing loopholes in some of our corporate tax code. It talked about international trade and infrastructure, about the need to do the new international trade crossing. So it was an opportunity where literally, with the President's message, I believe I was fairly unique among politicians in the country that actually reached out to say, here's an opportunity where we can work together. And that's something, I'll probably go a little longer than you want, Rick, but I think it's an important message to get across. That this is something that we can be different than the rest of the country about how we approach problems and issues. And I want us to be a role model, and I've been trying to be a role model already. And what is that? That's a new way of doing things in government. Because if you look at the mess in Washington, and you think about the debt ceiling question and the thing that led to this message, how much of it has been fighting, bickering, blaming people? And have you ever seen a problem solved by blaming someone or by fighting with someone? The answer is no. And so if you look at the approach we've tried to take since I've been in office, I call it relentless positive action. And what does relentless positive action mean? It means we don't blame anyone for anything. So I've made no criticism of anyone that preceded me in office or the people we've worked with. It's about not taking credit for anything. It's about solving problems. And to say, we have serious problems. Do not waste energy on negative activity. Say, here's the problem. We need to solve that problem. And let's find the common ground where we can advance and make progress on that problem. Solve that problem, line up the next problem, solve it, and follow through in a relentless fashion. So one thing I firmly believe in, this is a difference we can make in the American political scene, is to be a role model to say the current way of how things work on the national level is flawed. Just think how many problems would have been solved, again, without blame, without fighting, and just focusing on what's a solution where we have common ground. It's exciting. And I really appreciate the partnership I've had with the legislature. But it's something we can all work on. So whenever I give a talk to people, whenever I have an opportunity, I actually ask them to hopefully say, this was not a nice talk. I want it to be a talk where you're fired up enough to say, I'm going to go tell my friends, my neighbors, somebody else about relentless positive action, about a new way of doing things, because it's about solving problems and not fighting.
I don't know if we can get a wide jib shot, but I'd just like to ask quickly, you don't have to if you don't want to, how many of you here in this audience would agree with the governor's premise that there is a mess in Washington? How many of you are on... I really wasn't doing that anecdotally, I really wasn't. But I was just interested, it would appear to be unanimous. There are some people who would think that the state of Michigan, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think, with Grant, and we talked a little bit about it with Sherry, that there is a need for education to be able to train workers and to get people to take part of these jobs. But there is the larger issue of education that has been talked about a lot. I don't even have to ask. I know there are education questions here. Brian, who do we have that wants to address education?
I'd like Andrew DeWint to stand up if we could. Full disclosure here, Andrew's dad works here at Wood TV 8 up in our traffic department, but unbeknownst to his dad and unbeknownst to us here in the news department, he emailed in a question for the governor. He's a sophomore right now. Andrew, what's your question?
My question is about your budget policies regarding education. I was wondering why you're cutting education and giving a lot of the money, pumping it into big business like Herbert Hoover did in the 1930s to try to stop the Great Depression.
Well, I appreciate your question, Andrew. Actually, you had two different dimensions to it, so I'll take them one piece at a time, if that's okay. First, on the issue of cutting education. Education is critically important for our future. But to be open with you, we have a broken educational system in our state. And unfortunately, the system has gotten too much caught up about the adults and about money.